Awesome. So appreciate everyone taking the time and for my fellow panelists here. So I think we've got a kind of pretty interesting discussion teed up this morning for you all, trying to situate digital assets in the context of what is probably the defining strategic issue for the United States and for the world, which is the relationship between U.S. and China. Some characterize it as a competition, a rivalry, maybe even something more adversarial than that. It is what I think unites more than most, kind of across the aisle considerations on policy, and to the extent that digital assets are now emerging as a relevant strategic issue. I think it's about time we start taking a serious look at how digital asset networks overlay with the larger strategic competition between U.S. and China. So I think we've got a really great set of perspectives here to kind of dig into this. I'll start with Representative Nunn. Since you sit on the subcommittee on competition with the CCP, as well as other subcommittees and your vantage point in DC, I was wondering if you could kind of give us your perspective on how you think digital assets relate to that U.S.-China relationship, if not rivalry, and then we can kind of let the other panelists kind of weigh in.
Well, first of all, thank you all very much for being out here this morning. You know, as a military guy, we certainly look at things in a strategic competition. I also think there's a huge economic opportunity. And so we serve on 3 committees of jurisdiction that I think are very important here. First and foremost, the Select Committee on Countering Communist China. That doesn't mean to say that everything coming out of China is bad. In fact, in a lot of ways, we want to continue to build that partnership. But in other aspects, we have already identified, I started off as director of cybersecurity under the Obama administration. I'm a Republican here, but we had, strategic competition with Huawei and ZTE, and we saw what they did in the telecommunications world. But for the United States calling the flag on this from a counterintelligence perspective, we had to build a infrastructure here in the United States that really mattered. I think we have the same opportunity now. I've got a bill called the Clarity Act, which really helps us focus on building the infrastructure around how we can have a successful digital asset marketplace in the U.S., build on U.S. rails, everything from blockchain down, so that we know the integrity of this going forward. And that's today's fight. We're going to look over the horizon here at what we can do in quantum cryptography so that we have security not just in our data, but in our digital transactions. The other 2 committees I want to flag here, which this team has worked well with us on, is that in Congress, digital assets fall under both the Ag Committee, where I serve because I'm from Iowa naturally, but also on the Financial Services Committee. And we've got 3 great subcommittees all focused on this. Now, the biggest challenge here is that Congress has multiple committees of jurisdiction. And we all know the technology, Sanjay will vouch for this, will blitzkrieg ahead on this. The policy is going to be the hard part to keep up with. So I'm very focused in identifying how do we do both at the same time so that we have the opportunity not only to start onboarding more digital assets to the United States, which I think for the last 4 years we've driven them offshore, to places in London and Singapore and worse, Iran, Russia, and China. But then also build a framework here that can be successful on the policy side so the technology piece that's being created can really take off effectively.
Excellent, Joe.
Yeah, and I just want to preface that with saying thank you so much for that view on how you feel, because as a U.S. builder of decentralized indexes, so we strive to create fully decentralized software available worldwide. And the question is, given the past 4 years, how do we accomplish that as not only builders, but as citizens of our country? And the way that happens is through a distinct approach with this administration of light touch regulation, allowing us to innovate and create these products for the world coming from the U.S. Because to Congressman's point, many of the creators of this space were driven out over the last couple of years. And what that puts at risk is not today or tomorrow, but 10, 15, 20 years from now, where Wall Street's going to be, where the center of finance is going to be. And these are much bigger stakes than what we're currently experiencing. So it's like, how do we regulate in a framework that makes a ton of sense to not only builders, but protect our users? And how do we bring digital assets to the forefront of not only innovation, but policy? So where we are today is trying to ascertain where that makes the most sense, and I commend the congressman for having some really great views on that. Yeah, thank you.
Good teamwork.
I tried. Thank you, sir.
Sanjay.
Good morning, everybody. First of all, and once again, thanks for the comments, Congressman. Completely agree with, and a big thanks to your championing the cause, out here, and then Joe for your comments out here. Quick background context, first of all. So I'm the chief strategy officer of a company called Auradine. We're a high technology company based in Silicon Valley. And we design cutting edge semiconductor chips. We design the full systems. We design the full software that goes into the Bitcoin mining infrastructure. We also use the same technology in another division for AI. And 2 points that I want to make. One is that Bitcoin is already mainstream and is becoming even more mainstream to the financial ecosystem of the US and of the world. Just in the US itself, there is multiple ETFs that I think everybody is aware that have already gone live. There are pension funds that invest in Bitcoin. There is, by different estimates, over 50 million Americans that own Bitcoin. And if you take the same thing around the world, it's become a part of the global financial ecosystem. So ensuring that the US has a lead and a critical role in something that is already mainstream and will become increasingly more mainstream is absolutely essential. The second point is that on the technology side, Bitcoin technology uses decentralized blockchain technology. To validate it, the miners that go and power that and the computation for that requires absolutely cutting edge technology. This is measured in terms of, it's going a little bit technical out here. It's talked about nanometer technology, the size of transistors. So the latest, in fact, your latest Apple iPhones are made on what is called a 3 nanometer technology. We designed Bitcoin mining systems using the same 3 nanometer technology. That's got applications in AI, it's got applications in defense, it's got applications in telecom. It's highly sensitive. And that is something that the US government already has taken note of. There's existing sanctions on access to this sensitive 3 nanometer or 4 nanometer technology to Chinese companies. And it's critical to ensure that the US maintains its leadership on the technology side for this going forward as well. So policies around that and practices around that are going to be critical.
You just teed up my next question perfectly. So the President of the United States, I believe in his Nashville speech, and I think it's been reiterated a few times, called for the U.S. to become a Bitcoin superpower, a crypto capital of the world, as well as, he wanted all the Bitcoin to be, mined in the United States. Maybe in a quite ambitious goal. But of course, as Sanjay just referenced, the supply chain for Bitcoin mining is heavily concentrated and dependent on Asian suppliers. And so to what extent do we think about those two different policy objectives, right? To make America a Bitcoin superpower, to have our own secure supply chains for these semiconductor chips, as well as the technology competition and these export controls that we've placed on China and the larger sort of risks across that supply chain. So Representative Nunn, obviously these are like right in your wheelhouse. How do you think about like the intersection between these different policy objectives, and what does like smart policy look like to help ensure American Bitcoin mining is successful and that we have a good sort of approach to securing that industry?
Well, first I want to compliment the president on the best speech ever at Nashville. He owned it. I think this is one of the things the president has come in very strongly with a new vision of how he wants to see the future, not just in the next 4 years, but for the United States to outpace our rivals. And yes, I absolutely think we need to be in a spot where we are limiting what gets out of both the United States and Taiwan. But the reality is we're not playing this game alone. We have real competitors, both in the private sector, but around the global stage, that have state actor funds pouring into this. And our ability is not going to be able to sanction or control our distribution. It's going to be to outpace them. And so there's a couple of things that we can do on this on the forefront right here in the United States. One, this means a top-down supply chain role that both the private sector can play in, particularly in the technological development, the execution, and the deployment, but then also on the public sector side, where, the president's number 2 goal here is unleash American energy. We've got to have a platform that allows us the hard infrastructure to be able to facilitate this. So if we want to be able to do real digital asset that converts into cryptocurrency that people are using, not just as a long-term investment strategy, but as a daily use capability, that means you've got to have the power grid that works. You've got to have a workforce that can build out the transmissions lines to actually make our data centers effective. This gives us a competitive edge, and it is a true public-private partnership that makes that happen. Now, what I will say is there are other central controlled governments that are also looking at doing this, and they have the ability to roll it out immediately. The amount of data centers popping up across China is a sea change. before we all know the Wyoming case, they were coming to the United States and trying to basically ride on the backbone of American energy and data to be able to be as effective in buying things like Bitcoin as we were here in the United States. Now, we've been able to stop that, but the reality is they are replicating that inside China today, and they're doing it at a cheaper, certainly for anybody who's a conservationist, a much dirtier environment, but it's also becoming a competitor here, which brings us back to not only building the hard infrastructure, but how do we build the digital infrastructure? I'll go back to blockchain being a huge part of underpinning this going forward. But I think our private sector guys also recognize the American taxpayer alone isn't going to be able to pay for and fund this. It's got to come from a financial incentive that will bring not only new dollars to it, but long-term security for the country. And candidly, a huge opportunity for innovators who want to play in this space.
This might be a good segue for Sanjay to step in terms of maybe digging under the hood there on the ASIC supply chain, right? I know your company's at the forefront of that, trying to bring some of that back to the United States. Could you give you a perspective on, as an innovator, as a business that's trying to, find supply chains, trying to understand those risks and those redundancies? How are you sort of navigating that terrain?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to comment Congressman's note on the public-private partnership. I think that will be critical going forward. On the private side, in the US, there's tremendous technology innovation already, and we tap right into that. We have a team of very specialized engineers and scientists. We operate on the absolute latest semiconductor nodes. I think I mentioned the latest node being 3 nanometer. And just to put that in perspective for anybody who's non-technical, the diameter of a hair strand is around 70,000 nanometers. So you can actually pack 25 to 30,000 of these in the width of, you have this one transistor, you can actually pack 25 to 30,000 of them. So absolutely cutting edge. And this is critical from an energy efficiency point of view, performance point of view. It powers a lot of other applications. I mentioned AI and telecom. We're already at that point. So we are pushing the boundaries in terms of technology innovation. Now, Congressman had referred in the past few years, there was concern in the telecom industry, and there's a stated, well-published view upon the challenges with a Chinese company called Huawei, where Huawei was getting access to latest semiconductor technology, and they were employing technology infrastructure for telecom, which had concerns from a national security point of view, and also access to that technology which can be used for other applications like defense and other areas as well. And they had sanctions on them, they're blacklisted. If you look at the Bitcoin mining side, today, most of that technology, and it's actually already banned technology that Chinese companies should not have access to. So it's a matter of the US government and on the public side, looking at that and enforcing it. But from a US point of view, we're not the only company. We would encourage other companies as well. And we have the technology, we have the wherewithal. We have a supply chain that's dual sourced every part of the supply chain. It's all outside of China. We have manufacturing in the US, we have design in the US, we have laboratories in the US. So that gives rise to other industries. So we think that from a supply chain perspective, if US needs to be the Bitcoin capital of the world, as the president has indicated, it also needs to take charge of its own destiny on the technology and supply chain side as well. It's absolutely critical. Otherwise, you cannot be the technology capital and you say all the technology actually comes from China. That does not work hand in hand.
I want to push you a little bit. Like how feasible is that, right? So obviously the market is quite heavily dominated by Bitmain and related companies. Obviously you guys are successful, but I think some have tried and many have failed to do the same sort of things. Like what are the practical challenges that you're facing as you see this trajectory to try to actually make that a reality in the next few years?
So Matt, again, great question. So I think there's two things. One is to have the idea and the concept behind it. The second is to actually have the ability to design at that latest technology and use that innovation. We're already at that level. So we started our first product, 4 nanometer, we're in 3 nanometer, highly energy efficient. We have some unique features, which is called Energy Tune, which allows the balancing of the electrical grids for supply and demand. So it's called demand response that you can actually do, and you can do it dynamically, but nobody else in the industry. We have technology where you can deploy the miners in hot conditions, as hot as 50 degrees Celsius or 122 Fahrenheit, which allows for deployment in places like that use renewable energy for solar energy. or place close to gas flared, places where you can actually take the gas, convert to energy, and actually use it. So all of that technology we have. But beyond that, there needs to be the ability to scale on the operations side and supply chain side. And we've been doing that for a good number of months. We're actually shipping already in the thousands of units. So we already have that scale. And the ability to ramp up further is absolutely doable. Now, when we started off, there were 6, 7 other companies. I think some of them underestimated the level of complexity and what it takes to actually get to market out there. There are other companies besides us that are actually really trying quite actively in that particular space. But the ability to ramp is already there. We've already proven that within our company. We believe that there are other companies out there that can prove that as well to be able to take that forward. But there needs to be an approach where we don't have dumping, we don't have price aggressive, because we have seen actions where any new entrant tries to enter the market and you have a well-established Chinese player, immediately try to get them out of the market by aggressively cutting prices, driving them out, and then raising prices later. So you have some of that as well. But at present, we're well placed to take care of demand in the market.
Excellent, thank you. Pivoting back a bit more, sort of a global perspective, Joe. Think about this quite dramatic regulatory shift and rhetorical shift coming out of the United States, and knowing that crypto is a global industry, and many other jurisdictions and cities have tried to, attract business, attract capital, attract innovators, and there's existing entrepôts in the Emirates, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, a few other places that have thriving crypto industries. To what extent do you think the United States' recent pivot, rhetorically, and now starting to be backed up by some policy shifts, will actually pull some of those innovators back? What are you seeing, and what more needs to be done to sort of make America the centerpiece of this industry?
Well, I think it's a twofold question. I think that number one, we're all currently aware that the U.S. has the largest institutional markets on the planet, and I think the gateway for our industry is to bridge traditional finance with blockchain-based finance, to where the user at the end of the day has no idea that the systems that are under the hood are being powered by blockchain technology. And if we can work to get a place where there's this synergy between blockchain and TradeFi, where it becomes one ecosystem through whether it's decentralized finance or traditional finance or merging of the two on the blockchain, we open up access to trillions of dollars in capital. And that's obviously going to incentivize builders from all over the world to want to come in and play a part of our ecosystem, and not only developing it, but fostering it and continuing our role as the most powerful player in finance. So I think that's the first approach, is you want to get builders in an environment where the regulatory framework is there, because we already know the finance framework is there from an institutional perspective. But secondly, to the congressman's point again, the regulations and the rules have to be there. We need to know as builders how we are operating, and the regulatory frameworks that are currently being created in Washington need to be in a place where we have accessibility to markets, we have accessibility to capital, we know the rules, we know the on-ramps, the off-ramps, and the things that we're trying to face as an industry. We have a framework of what those rules look like, and we can create products for the world, not only just the US, but the world, that actively capture our views on regulation and our views on the intersection of traditional finance and institutional capital.
Excellent. Representative, why don't you close us out? And with the final question for you is you span a number of different committees. You talk to your colleagues. You obviously have expertise in a lot of these relevant domains. What do you think is missing from the conversation, or what do you think your colleagues need further sort of education about to sort of bring digital assets into these conversations around national security, technology, competition?
I think first, I love the fact that we're in the silent disco room, and would love to have the opportunity to click on and hear what they're talking about in Europe right now, because Europe has an over-regulatory environment where they're running this. I'd love to be able to click over and hear what they're talking about in London and Singapore, where they have freelancers, but they recognize that crypto, and more importantly, data at large, is the new gold rush of the next 4 years. And the person who is first shooter in the space is going to do incredibly well. And then I click over to, what they're talking about in China right now. And they see this as absolutely foundational to their opportunity, not just in a 5-year leap forward, but in a next 5-month leap forward to say, how do we become competitive in this space? And they've already moved onshore with their structural infrastructure. And I think that's something that both us as policymakers need to appreciate not just the technological requirements that are necessary for this, but where whoever gets on this, terra firma first is going to have a real strategic advantage that's going to echo into the next generation. So when we click back to where we are in this room, what are we doing in the United States? I think there's a couple of things that we need to be able to drive. One, to Joe's point here, make this seamless for the American public. Make it so that we have not only trust in it, it's another one of the bills we're leading here, the Financial Technology Protection Act, so that our intelligence community, our law enforcement, and our locals know how to go after illicit finance on this in the same way the FBI has done with greenbacks and gold bars before. We need to have that same level of confidence here in the United States. That gives us strength. The other aspect of this is, in addition to the hard infrastructure, understanding how do we best incentivize? Because money is going to flow, candidly, to where there's the best return. And that's not an un-American thing. That is a free market thing here. I don't want to see that money flowing out, whether it's to our friends in London or Singapore, or whether, worse, it's to our adversaries in Beijing. We've got to find a way to make it not only lucrative to be here, confident to be here, but that we've got a policy regime set up. I think this gives us a window that is not only truly bipartisan, but we've got somebody in the White House who both the president and his team, David Sachs and I have talked a lot on this. It's interesting that he is the crypto czar and artificial intelligence. That says something about where this administration's priorities are on it. We in Congress need to make this enshrined beyond just the next 4 years, because as we all saw, no disrespect to the last SEC chairman, but I mean, that was a singular driving force in forcing good innovation and capital offshore. We need to have an environment where folks here on the policy level recognize that a decision made in the halls of Congress or in the boardroom of a SEC meeting is going to really drive a long-term strategic advantage or disadvantage in this space. And I think, the partners who are up here are the ones bringing the best ideas forward. Let's enshrine it in law. And this is a conversation with the president as well. This can't just be a 4-year EO. This has to be something that we codify so we've got stability and long-term planning for the guys who are going to drive this.
You heard it here first. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot, everybody.